Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today we're diving into a document that might seem dry on the surface, but trust me, it has all the juicy details of a financial drama. We're looking at a filing from Campbell Fund Trust, and while it might not be as exciting as a Hollywood blockbuster, it tells a story about money, deals, and following the rules. This report is essentially a heads up about Campbell Fund Trust selling some of its own equity or ownership to investors. These weren't public sales. They were private deals, so it's very important to understand why. Let's decode what really happened. Before we jump in, if you appreciate getting straight insights from boring and overly formal corporate documents, make sure you're subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below, so you can discuss these filings in real time with all the other members. Come discuss with us. Let's start with what kind of document this actually is. This is an 8K form, which is essentially a current report companies file with the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, to announce major events that shareholders should know about. Think of it like a company's way of saying, hey, big news, and because it is so significant, they must announce it. The date of the report is June 30, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2020, 2025. So this is pretty recent. First, let's figure out who Campbell Fund Trust actually is. There isn't that much available about them as a company outside of these filings, but they seem to be an investment fund of some sort. The address listed is the same as Campbell & Company LP, which manages investment portfolios, so that gives us an idea. Here we see a section where the company confirms they aren't using this filing for things like communicating about a merger or takeover. It's just a standard update, so let's keep moving. This part indicates that the company doesn't have securities registered under Section 12BS of the Securities Exchange Act. This usually applies to companies listed on a major stock exchange like the New York Stock Exchange, or NASDAQ. Since it says NDONT, this fund isn't listed on those well-known exchanges. This makes sense given that the fund is private. Now, let's dig into the heart of the matter. This section, item 302, is all about unregistered sales of equity securities. This is where the action is because it details who got what and how much it was worth. Basically, Campbell Fund Trust sold what they call units of beneficial interest to some investors, both old and new. These units are like shares in the fund representing ownership. Here is the part we cared about. The total amount of money that the fund got in this most recent sale. The fund sold these units under what's called a private placement, meaning they didn't offer them to the general public, like in an IPO or initial public offering. Instead, it was offered to selected investors. For Series A, they got $4,992,000, or almost $5 million. For Series D, they got $3,747,867, and finally for about $3,074 fifth numbers. These are all cash numbers. The company states they relied on an exemption found in Section 4.2 of the Securities Act of 1933. This section allows companies to avoid registration requirements when they're not making a public offering. To keep it simple, they issued these units privately, following something called Regulation D, where they have some exemptions to the rules since not just anyone could buy these investments. Finally, the document is signed by Thomas P. Lloyd, who is the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer, and is a formal process to declare that everything stated in the filing is correct and true to their knowledge. Now let's zoom out for a moment and see what this filing tells us about Campbell Fund Trust. Firstly, it shows the company is raising capital. Selling units means they're bringing in more money, which could be used for new investments, paying off debts, or expanding their operations. Seeing sales in multiple series suggests a structured fundraising approach, targeting different types of investors perhaps, or using different fund types depending on the preference of the investor. Secondly, since they didn't register the sale with the broader public, this means Campbell Fund Trust chose to tap into existing networks and relationships for funding. This can be faster and less expensive than a public offering, but it also limits how many people can invest. Finally, the details give us a glimpse into the fund's compliance practices. Clearly, they very carefully document what regulations they are following, which is often the sign of a professional and detail-oriented company looking to follow the law, which in turn might suggest a better investment opportunity. Overall, Campbell Fund Trust appears to be strategically growing its capital base through private placements. This approach allows them to maintain flexibility and control over their investor pool while also navigating the regulatory landscape effectively. Alright, that's our breakdown of Campbell Fund Trust's latest filing. What's your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Remember, this wasn't an IPO or a public offering. This was a private deal with chosen investors. Drop your thoughts in the comments if this analysis was valuable. Hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. And as always, don't forget to dive deeper to our Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.